was a rock watcher. Rock watcher. Rock watcher.
Hey everybody, and welcome to What the Hell Happened to Them News Update Edition. Yes, we're having my schedule sort of a little hectic these days, so it's hard to coordinate with Joe, who of course is a father of two, so it is tough for us to meet if the schedule gets thrown off even a little bit, but we had a lot of things building up over the last few weeks. We wanted to get out there and keep you informed on all things rock, as a lot seems to have been happening recently. First, we just want to dive into the most recent episodes of Young Rock, a show on NBC. I think it's on Tuesday nights. I never get to watch it live, though, as I was born in the 90s, and we have seemed to all have moved on from wired cable. But last week's episode involved the youngest of the Young Rocks, but mostly, again, from the father and mother's point of view. It had looked like the father had signed with the Rock's grandmother's competitor in this Hawaiian wrestling circuit, but then it turns out that was a big misunderstanding, but the father and the mother-in-law have a big fight, and the mother, I think, learned some things, too. She had come to sing a song for Star Search, which, of course, was still a thing when the Rock was a young boy. But it turns out the song she picked was a song that everybody was recording and sending out because it's the hot song of the summer, I guess. So she learns then to kind of go and sing her own song or something like that, which is what inspires the Rock to pick this Army general played by Rosario Dawson to be his vice presidential candidate in the election. Not fully certain of the connections there, particularly because we do not know much about this running mate. The only interesting tidbit we find is that she actually, I think, was running against him in a different party or maybe within the primary, but he wanted her because she had a differing opinion, which is a neat sort of concept. The West Wing show sort of explored that many, many years ago, and that used to be like early on in elections, the losing candidate would be the vice president. The second place finisher, I guess, technically would be the vice president, which is an interesting thing. Again, back in those days, the vice president didn't really have any power, and nobody was really certain what the vice president was supposed to do until Lincoln was shot. Also, there weren't really like primary systems yet, so it was really just like some dudes decided to run for president of their own accord, and clearly had some public support if they had desired to run and came in second place, versus now where your second place guy is just a guy from the other party. There's no reason to think that most Americans would like him or things like that, so that probably wouldn't fly today. But if we had a more kind of open pool, that might be something to kind of revisit again. So that choosing of the vice presidential candidate and the press being like, what? Why? Why her? That makes The Rock tell the story about when he was 5 or whatever age he's supposed to be there. And then the following week, he's having an interview with Randall Park about why did you choose this person? Or like, why are you sticking with this vice presidential candidate when everybody's telling you what a terrible idea this is? And then we get a story about college-age Rock having a friend named Hopkins that I guess he's still friends of, and his grades are really bad as he's getting ready to play his first football season, because the first season he was injured. But, geez, I just watched this yesterday. I don't remember any of it. His grades are really bad, so they make him take a part-time, like, volunteer at the Student Service Center or something, and he has a job to go look at phones, and he has to go with a partner, this Hopkins character that I guess is his lifelong friend. Some reason this job of checking to see that phones still work at the school is a 2-person job. I don't know why, but that seems to be the case. And then Hopkins convinces The Rock he doesn't have to check all the phones. They'll just take the list of phones they're supposed to check. The phones always work. When one of them doesn't, somebody will tell them. And then they go and watch action movies. And then it turns out that I don't know who this person is. They all seem to, though, that the person from the school is going to check to make sure that the phones definitely work. And now they have to go and like do this kind of action movie homage to beat her to each of the phones to make sure that they're all okay. So you get a lot of like the Beverly Hills Cop music is in there, and a few other kind of musical cuts from the famous 80s action movies are in there. And then, of course, there's an infamous scene at the end of this Young Rock episode where they have one last phone that she's about to go, and one of these wires has to go to the battery, and one has to go to the transmitter or transceiver, and one's red and one's blue, and he doesn't know which is which. And like he's on the walkie with Hopkins, who's on the phone with the guy at student service teaching them how to help the phone. And so it's like if he was cutting a bomb, which wire's the wire to cut, blah, blah, blah. And then I guess Hopkins somehow taught him the importance of sticking by your friend, even when they seem like the wrong choice. Even though, one, Hopkins was a very bad example for The Rock here and didn't actually help him that much, and they almost cost him his football playing ability. Two, it was all really The Rock's idea to stick with Hopkins when Hopkins had got injured in a bike accident right before the last few phones were being done. Kind of okay, somewhat amusing action story homage there. Not sure how it relates to the VP. A little bit of a stretch there. There's also a storyline where it seems that The Rock somehow smuggled the grandmother into the United States from Samoa. For some reason, he helped her become an American citizen again. I don't know if they're going to tell how that happened, or they never will, because there are a lot of legal implications for The Rock there. He seemed to just want us to realize that he was such a good guy when he was young. He was able to help out his struggling grandmother. Because ultimately, that storyline doesn't go anywhere. It's just she comes back, The Rock's parents welcome her back, and then all of the wrestling gang, the Iron Sheik and Andre the Giant and the beef jerky guy, they all just like, hey, we're happy to have you back. And she's like, oh, it's good to be back. And like, that's it. That's all that happens in like the 3 or 4 times we cut to her storyline. So and then at the end, it turns out that whole episode, that interview with The Rock was being played for Rosario Dawson by Randall Park, who is a delight in this episode. And once again, The Rock taking himself a little too seriously. And sometimes, I'm a little curious about how much The Rock actually wants to be there, because the look on his face just seems, I don't know if it's like boredom or he's just like, I got to get through this in an hour so I can go. There's something about his presence in these interviews he has, not just with Randall Park, but with everybody. He just doesn't feel like he wants to be there or wants to put in very much effort. It's very odd to me. But Rosario Dawson comes in as the VP candidate and then says what a great president The Rock would be. She has some funny jokes she has some jokes she thinks are funny at the end that she tells to Randall Park. Like, it's this long kind of monologue about why The Rock would be such a great president before then and things like that. And I'm really feeling this conspiracy theory thing that The Rock is actually planning to run for president, and he's like trying to, what's the word I want to look for? He's trying to brainwash us into thinking what a good idea that would be and why he's a great candidate. And I'll get back to that in a moment. But first, the first news update on the Young Rock is about the ratings of Young Rock, since that's the show we're talking about. And it seems that between the 5th episode and the 6th episode, the 6th episode being the episode with the Young Rock in Hawaii and the father not actually signing up with the competitor to his grandmother's wrestling circuit, that episode fell 12.9% in total audience and 20% in the 18 to 49 demographic, which of course is the key one for advertisers, because apparently those are the only people that buy things. I don't know. And in fact, from the premiere, the show has dropped 50%. Your audience is always really going to drop just over time. Sometimes it can pick up. I don't know, like with Lost, it sort of would pick up early on, but then after each season premiered, it would just sort of shed viewers because the summer goes by, you forget about it, you are no longer emotionally attached because of that long break. The shows that seem to do well these days after, a couple of seasons are Breaking Bad and How I Met Your Mother. Both became insanely popular once you could binge them, and their audiences grew then. Big Bang Theory was just an average show for a couple of years, but once they started adding more women, that was when the show actually grew. But other than those first 2 or 3 years, you did see sort of a slow decline, and then it kind of leveled out because the shows don't usually gain audiences. They normally lose them. And so for some reason, yes, The Rock's movie popularity isn't going well with the TV transition, but maybe part of that is that he's not in it very much, and it's these younger Rock people. Though in the show, the Rock's personality I don't like very much. He seems to take himself too seriously, but I kind of like high school Rock and college Rock a bit. Like, I don't mind following them around. I don't know if I like young Rock, the boy Rock, or not, because none of the episodes take place from his point of view. And part of that is likely, a logistical issue with having to have a child on set. And the labor laws around them are very strict, and you don't have much time for them, so it's hard to shoot a single camera comedy with them. It's even hard to shoot a multi-camera comedy, which is why, like Young Babies, you would have twins, and this is where Mary-Kate and Ashley come from. They're only playing one character, but you can swap them out and avoid going over on your child labor laws. In the Young Rock's concern, you'd also have to give that kid a tutor on set. If he's friends with other kids, it's all just adding up cost-wise. So I think that's part of the reason why they want to focus more on the adults to save money on the production. But also, The Rock just might not remember he might not have been an active participant in his young life he's not making a lot of choices as an 8-year-old. And so this most recent Child Rock episode was him just hanging out with Andre the Giant while he also tells a story about his parents that he's not even around for. But, whatever. He could have heard that secondhand. But also it's just an excuse to have Andre the Giant that I bet most people would want to see more of since he is popular. All right, so for that episode 6, that Andre the Giant Child Rock episode, it only drew 2.5 million viewers. And now this would be, long ago, this would have been a nightmare, right? But this actually for broadcast TV in 2021, it's not awful. It's not great, but it's not terrible. When The Big Bang Theory was the most popular show in America, it was drawing 20 million viewers, 18 million viewers. The days when that was an average amount of viewership, or sometimes even a low amount of viewership, those are long gone. 2.5 million, not terribly unusual. And if you can keep that 18 to 49 demographic up enough, the advertisers will likely let you go. But it's likely but that 2.5 million, that's on sort of the low end. If you can't really afford to go much lower, it's basically hoping that they can build an audience at some point because they can market the Rock to their show at some point in the future, maybe over the summer, maybe in the fall when they give it a fall premiere. There are 11 shows in the season, so likely they'll definitely just kind of get those out of the way and done because they haven't been able to produce much TV anyway, but, that might be the end of the Young Rock forever. Now, what's interesting is that it's an episode order of 11. That is 13, I've seen a lot. 6, I've seen. 13's an odd number, 11's an odd number, even for a winter premiere, because it did premiere in February, so it's not like March or April when you would kind of get these shorter run shows. Because you have a movie star, a very popular one, and you have a showrunner that's had 2... maybe successful is not the right word. Fresh Off the Boat, obviously a successful show. It had 6 seasons, turned Constance Wu into a star, brought Randall Park into our hearts. Don't Trust the Bee in Apartment 23 only had 2 seasons, though I think the idea, was very good. The characters were very good. I think some plot-ish things they sort of rushed through a little too quickly. I think they maybe ran out of ideas a little too soon. I'm not sure how, because you had a sort of a hotbed of conflict you could do with those characters. It also was sort of a hard thing to sell, especially for broadcast, because you have to have this woman that's the main character that's supposed to be awful, but she also has to be nice enough so that we like her. It's tough to kind of juxtapose. Fresh Off the Boat, obviously very appealing. This feels in the same vein, right? It's a celebrity talking about their childhood. And that one was sort of a straight kind of Wonder Years thing where the narrator is looking back on his childhood and being like, all this stuff happened. And then now I'm trying to think, was there even a narrator in there? It just might have been a straight flashback kind of thing. Whereas this one is the more interesting conceit, right? It's sort of a more creative approach to this type of story time. We have 3 different eras we get to look at for The Rock. And The Rock the frame story of it is this very quirky idea of The Rock running for president, though I think there are sinister undertones. So it's just unfortunate that this isn't connecting for some reason. I wonder if people's viewing habits are thrown off for the pandemic and things like that. I like to think she would get another shot because she did have Fresh Off the Boat, but if she's got one success and two failures now, that I'm not sure. And I wonder if it will be held against her that she failed with the Young Rock property because it was sort of built for success. You know, it's a show that is just easily marketable, and yet she still wasn't able to draw an audience. Now, that being said, I'm wondering like how much control The Rock has over the final scripts, because there are elements of like her type of humor that was even able to make it into Fresh Off the Boat, but that I grew to respect her for in Don't Trust the Bee. And this is sort of the show that has the least amount of that so far. And I wonder like how much of that is like her changing as a writer as she's running more of these shows, or if The Rock doesn't want her to put those kind of weird jokes in there. That's sort of an interesting thought there. So Young Rock might be canceled. I, wouldn't regret not having to watch it anymore. I'm just sort of surprised the show isn't very interesting. Now, another crazy headline here. Apparently, Dwayne Johnson can override WB execs about restoring the Snyderverse. This is crazy. So Zack Snyder's Justice League obviously came out a few weeks ago. I have no desire to watch the 2-hour version of that movie, let alone the 4-hour version of that movie. I saw his version of Batman v Superman, and it was way too long, and the things that seemingly were probably added, I had no need for. I didn't have a need for the movie at all, quite frankly, so I'm not really the best audience here, but it did not make me enjoy the movie anymore. But I hadn't seen the original one, so maybe that one's just way, way worse. And this one makes it, like, okay to watch. Wasn't okay to watch. Not great. But people seem to be liking the Justice League despite the fact that it is 4 hours. And this is coming from a guy that will watch 8-hour Hungarian cinema. I have no desire to watch 4 hours of the Justice League. But people are liking it, so they want kind of him to have creative control of that universe again. But now Dwayne Johnson, who's going to star in Black Adam, which is a superhero I've never heard of, but that's probably not surprising. I actually, when I went maybe a few months ago, I had to go look at a costume shop with my costumer for my upcoming film, and there was a whole room in that building that was just for Black Adam's costume, so that costume designer could kind of go in and out and grab what they needed for that day's shoot or for the next day's shoot. So Dwayne Johnson really, for some reason, wants Black Adam to face against the whole Justice League in one of the Black Adam sequels. And his origin movie will introduce the Justice Society. I don't know who they are. I've never heard of them. And so he wants Adam versus the Justice Society and the Justice League. I don't know why we would want to see that. I guess, does that mean Black Adam is a bad guy? Is he an anti-hero? I don't know. I wish Joe were here to explain these things, but I bet he doesn't know either. So Warner Brothers, for some reason, is reluctant to do anything with the Snyderverse, despite the fact that they paid $75 million to put out a Snyder Cut and that it is very popular. So they would rather just reboot all those characters again, and I am not sure why they think that will be better than just the fact that... And I don't... Listen, for the movies of those that I've seen and for the Marvel movies that I have seen, I have no idea why people... I think that there's like an echo feedback chamber where people just assume all the DC movies are going to be bad when they have... The only difference between them and the Marvel movies is that these ones are a little less humorous and there's a little darker of a color palette. And that's it. And maybe that's enough for people to have it in their head, or maybe it's just sort of marketing reinforcing itself, where like Marvel, because they came out first, is just like, that's the gold standard. Probably Warner Brothers shot itself in the foot by, it took us like 3 movies to get to the Justice League. Most of the characters were introduced in the Justice League, and they couldn't just hold on and get their, the first Batman movie is when he fights Superman. And I get the thought of like, we don't want to see the Batman origin again, because I certainly don't. But just give us a Batman movie where he's like already there. I don't know, like he does his own thing. And then you can team up with Superman. And that was like Superman's sequel, that Batman has to fight him. And I like the idea of Batman v Superman where like the world is unsure what to do with Superman because he is so powerful. That's something worth exploring. But we lost a lot of it because Jesse Eisenberg has to just be a weirdo and like, I don't know, turn Michael Shannon into a weird giant monster, and Wonder Woman has to appear, and she actually appeared more because the Wonder Woman movie was so popular, and Batman has to show up, so we actually lose a lot of Superman and that interesting plot dynamic, and part of it, I think, is because Superman is not an interesting character. I'm told by comic fans that that's not true, and that the movies just aren't getting it right compared to the comic books. I can't argue with that because I don't know anything about it. I don't know what you do with one Superman movie, let alone two. And which is weird. Nobody wants Batman origin stories anymore, but Superman ones, we've gotten way more of those, I think. Right? Because they tried one in 2006 too. And they had 70s things where Batman, you just had sort of like the one in the 90s and then that Christopher Nolan one. So you only had two. I don't know. People are just bitching about everything, I guess. So whatever. They're all the same movies. I don't know why you think one's way better than the other one. They're all stupid crap that's happening and then people fight and explode. I've got a whole revisionist essay on this about Westerns, if you want to check that out. That link will be in the show notes. So Dwayne Johnson, I guess, is tweeting out things like the hierarchy of power in the DC universe is about to change as a means of promoting his Black Adam movie, and he wants to beat up Superman and Wonder Woman, and I don't know why. I don't know what the goal is here. His film will be coming out in July, so of course we'll have to review that begrudgingly. So I guess because he calls himself Franchise Viagra, he thinks that he can override the Warner Brothers executive because Warner Brothers is now owned by AT&T, and sources think that they would side with The Rock over WB, because I guess the press is saying that WB doesn't know how to make these movies, and The Rock has fixed many franchises, though I disagree. I guess, though, they are making a lot of money, and that's probably all they're looking at. If The Rock wants more Snyderverse stuff, fine, I guess. I don't know, whatever. I don't know why you make a Black Adam movie when people I have heard of, like The Flash, I mean, that's it, I don't know. Why the other Justice League teammates aren't getting more movies, but you would already greenlit a movie about a superhero that's not in the Justice League that I've never heard of? And you haven't figured out what you want to do with Batman because Ben Affleck has walked away and you still haven't put out a third Superman movie. So I'm just not sure what you want to do with your franchise. You know, what I will say about Marvel that they are doing right is they're kind of consistent. Right, we're going to do 2 movies, we're going to introduce all the superheroes, and then eventually they're going to show up in the meetup film, and then we got another wave, and now Spider-Man's leading in. So at least there's something to follow, right? Because if it is this Marvel television series, you can kind of see how the seasons are going, and what these episodes are doing and how they're all kind of tying together. I'm so confused now about what the DC thing is, and the fact that they need another DC movie to explain why they're rebooting the DC movie seems also confusing, because you're going to have to do weird time stuff and alternate reality stuff, and yet you also want to do Batman movies where there are standalone Batman stories, each played by a different actor. It's just like you have all your IP and you're just throwing it against the wall because you don't know how to form any coherency with it. So I don't know, do whatever you want, I guess, because it's all going to make stupid money. Like, here's the thought I had is like, I'm seeing what Netflix is coming out with soon, and it's like all these weird teen sci-fi blah blah stuff, generic things, and it reminded me of a lot of stuff I would try to write between the ages of like 10 and 14. And my thought was like, 14-year-old Patrick would have been really great and popular in the Hollywood screenwriting milieu of the current day, right? Like, somehow that is what audiences, I guess, are demanding, is like young, generic, random sci-fi fantasy things, big action scope things. Is that like where we want to be? Do we want what a 14-year-old could come up with and conceive and write to be what is popular and good Americana cinema? I can't imagine that. And I might be overstating some things here, but like there is that element of like appealing to the lowest common denominator that, I don't know, maybe we should be wary of, because we want all these movies to make $1 billion, so we have to make them all for $250 million. But again, I'm not going to go on this rant again. I have other episodes where I talk about it, and we kind of go into like Marvel's TV approach and why that can free them up to do interesting things. I won't bore you with it now. Then, of course, going back to the Young Rock episode we have just talked about, it seems that a majority of people would like to see Dwayne Johnson run for president. Some people also want Matthew McConaughey to run for the governor of Texas. I don't know anything about that. That's just in sort of the same news articles that I was reading. Consumer research platform Pipsley found that 58% of respondents said that they would like to see McConaughey run for Texas governor and Johnson run for president. I don't know if that means that 58% of people wanted both or together. And I'm not too familiar with Pipsley. I don't know how reliable of a pollster they are. So, you can take a lot of this with a grain of salt. Turns out Johnson has coyly stated that I would consider a presidential run in the future if that's what people wanted. As for whether Americans want celebrities to run for political office in general, it seems that 45% find that celebrities are free to do whatever they want, while only 13% think that they must just stick to acting, and 11% think that they must stick to political activism at most, instead of actual office. So that's a little frightening that somehow in this post-Trump era, we are now okay with celebrities running for office. And you've obviously had some in the past. Wasn't Jesse Ventura a governor at some point? Did I make that up? Maybe he just ran for governor? Of course, Arnold Schwarzenegger was a governor of California for, a term. Sonny Bono ran for Congress or something. So occasionally celebrities have dipped their hat in the ring. Ronald Reagan, of course, famously was an actor who then became governor, who then became president. But he was also president of the Screen Actors Guild. I don't know, he had dipped his toes in that type of work already, though then going from that to governor is a big stretch, admittedly. So a little bit of that's there, but something about Trump being a media persona primarily, a marketer of himself as a brand, has turned, which is basically what running for political office is now anyway. He just already has this backing of people know him from The Apprentice or from his books, his business decisions that weren't even that great. There's already that name brand recognition. It's the problem we have now in Hollywood where they want, with IPs and with sequels, that they want to only back things that people already know. So if political parties are struggling with each other, then they might be like, well, we don't want to back this candidate because nobody knows who they are, even though they're very qualified at what they're doing. But people know who The Rock is, and people like The Rock. And this sort of speaks to an issue where you can probably envision this more, because since Bush 2, politics stopped being about policy so much. A little bit here and there gets talked about. But mostly all people kind of care about and want to peruse these days is the ideology. Even like the Affordable Care Act was a matter of ideology, not policy. What everybody was hearing was this guy wants some form of universal health care. And everybody's opinion was based just on that. And there wasn't much talk about what would that look like? How do we make that work? How do we compromise that with all the people who don't want a system like that? And that is how they run. But I don't know, the last two, 2016, 2020, a lot of it's just jobs back in America, or de-arm the police and, stick it to Wall Street, or lower taxes, things like that. This isn't a critique on if those things are good or bad. Some of those things I think need to happen. It's not overly discussed or fleshed out how we would achieve those things. And most political voters don't even care about the details. They hear the buzzwords they want to hear, and that's the candidate they back, which is my theory. But part of that is also this feedback chamber we have of this. It's not necessarily a result of the two-party system. You're always going to have some form of that, even if it's just coalitions of parties forming. It's the same sort of idea, that one side just has to, or different factions have to team up to overpower the other side, right? And it's what the Democrats were able to do in 2020 is they were able to get their more leftist side on board enough with Joe Biden, mostly as an anti-Trump platform. And that's, again, an ideology thing, right? Biden was saying, we got to get rid of the hate in America. We can't have Trump as president. That's why you should vote for me. It's not a great, you couldn't have done that in 1980, in 1992, 1996. That would be sort of unfathomable because you're not really saying anything. You're not saying, okay, you're president and now the hate just magically disappears. How are you going to legislate against hate? What is your actual plan to do that, to bring this era of healing that you're promising? Because so far it's not happening because Democrats are just passing bills with no Republicans signing on. And the Republicans are hoping to do that to stop him from doing anything so that in 4 years they can be like, look, he accomplished nothing. And that's sort of, we're going to run into big troubles where it's already sort of a giant mess, but at some point we're going to cross a point of no return. And the country's going to have to undergo a rather seismic shift to get itself out of this Funk is too light of a word, but I'm trying to be a little polite here in this week's podcast episode. So just some things to worry about there. Now, again, I am no political expert, so you can take all that with a grain of salt. I really just wanted to bring up the point that people would be really excited if The Rock ran for president, and I think that's crazy. 58% of you want The Rock to run for president. You don't even know what he stands for. He is smartly, for a man who wants to run for president, kept mum on just about everything, so that nothing can be held against him later on, so that he's not pigeonholed into a particular side or a party. He can be flexible as the winds change. He likely would be a Democrat, so he wouldn't even be able to run in 2024. It'd have to be 2028 at the earliest. The show has him running in 2032, so I guess there's an implication that one other person is president at least in between then. So fine, whatever. But 2028 at the earliest. So it's just sort of like, I like The Rock. I would like him to be president. But this is like how Bush 2 got elected. It was just like, I want to have fun with the cool cowboy guy, versus Al Gore was just like blah, blah, blah. He was the vice president of Clinton, who was a successful president during his run, but people were upset the second of the Monica Lewinsky affair. They're not even that upset about the Jennifer Flowers one. They were pretty happy with him afterwards. He had balanced the budget, he had done a few other things for social reform, not all of them entirely successful. By the end of it, because of that Monica Lewinsky thing and that impeachment trial and this debate about what the word no means and things like that, most people just didn't like him anymore because of that. Even though all of his actual political things were popular and seemed to be very helpful, just this outside political thing had soured us on him. And so, you have boring, stuffy Al Gore against wacky, fun cowboy guy. Right? That's the old thing. Who would you rather have a beer with? I don't know why that is a mentality we have gained in this country. I'd be interested to know if other countries, if people would want to have a beer with the prime minister or the chancellor. I don't know, the premier, I don't know why those things sort of matter that much to an American voter versus what they actually stand for. He could be just a big asshole. I think most people would, especially leftist people, they would want an asshole president that's going to get them what they want. But part of this too is that the president has become too powerful of an office. It was never really designed for the effect that it has. And I think it's only increased in power because of, a limited attention span now. More people know their presidents than their congressmen or senators, even though legislation is being done by these congressmen and senators. And if you want those done, those are the people you should be more involved with. And the president's just there to say yes or no, to be a voice of the country. And that's important to a degree. But it wasn't even until TR that the president kind of had that bully pulpit, that he was able to kind of maneuver Congress around them. So it is a relatively recent thing compared to the history of our country. Though I guess now we're getting close to the halfway point on that anyway. So maybe not so relatively new these days, but if we kind of reduce how much sway the presidency could have, we could focus more on Congress again and kind of get legislation moving and compromise happening and things like that. But the issue is that people don't want to know those things. They're not sexy. There's no sex appeal to it. But one person every 4 years, now it's American Idol. And the fact that, Trump and now maybe The Rock, that celebrities are thinking about throwing their hats in the ring in these races kind of enforces that idea of this popularity contest, this American Idol style thing, where you just kind of want to vote for your favorite celebrities and what they stand for, but maybe it doesn't matter anymore. Now, a lot of this is doom and gloom. We haven't, Trump is sort of a weird example for a lot of reasons that I won't bog down this podcast with. But if The Rock or somebody else runs in the near future, that is sort of a better, or how many of them run, right? Wasn't Kanye West throwing around the idea of running for president? He'd even applied for it, but then quickly withdrew or something like that. Once we start to see this happen more and more, we get an indication of do the public really want celebrities to run? Do they like the idea of it? But then these people are on the campaign trails and in their newsfeed all the time. And then they go, this is actually kind of stupid. I wonder if that will happen or not. But there's a lot to say out there. So a very surprising political note there. Other celebrities people would want to run for president. Tom Hanks. 22% of people would want to see Tom Hanks be president. Of all celebrities, 21% would want to see Will Smith. 17% would want to see George Clooney. For women candidates, 30% would want to see Angelina Jolie for president. 27% of Oprah Winfrey. I'm not sure why you pick Angelina Jolie over Oprah Winfrey. That seems a little odd to me, but what do I know? And then 12% want Dolly Parton. Very loyal fan base she has there, I guess. Though she does seem to be a genuinely nice person and does care a lot about certain human rights things that are very important. And that really rounds out the Young Rock news update. I'd like to thank Lev Van Rensselaer for helping me put this together and getting some of those sound effects in there that you got to hear. Thank you all for bearing with us, even though this week and last we weren't able to give you new traditional content that you're used to. Next week, we definitely will have the Skyscraper episode available, and then we're nearly done with The Rock, and we'll do the unveiling of who our season 3 will be. We think you will be both surprised, but not disappointed. I am your host, Patrick Scale. You can find my features, documentaries, short films, video essays, animations, behind-the-scene footage, and so much more at QuixoticUnited.com and social media, presumably with a similar-sounding name. Thank you all for listening. Joe, say goodnight.
Good night.
Once there was this girl who swore that one day she would be a figure skating champion, and when she finally made